Back to New Day Northwest. Hey, have you ever heard of Munchausen by proxy? It's a form of child abuse in which the caregiver fakes, exaggerates, or in some cases induces illness in their child to get attention and sympathy. Well, this little understood crime is the subject of a new podcast called Nobody Should Believe Me. And here to talk about that is executive producer Andrea Dunlop. Welcome back to New Day. Always great to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me. Great to see you, Amity.
So when I heard you were doing a new project, I thought we have to talk to her. How did you become interested in this topic?
So I actually have a personal connection to this topic.
Really?
So my older sister has been investigated for it twice. And the first time was over 10 years ago, and my family became estranged over it. So this is a topic very close to my heart, and I kind of tell that story in the first episode of the podcast. So yeah, this is something that's become a big part of my life. It was the subject of my last novel, We Came Here to Forget.
Yep.
And after I put that book out into the world, I was doing some press on it and got to know one of the experts that we actually interview in the show, Dr. Mark Feldman. Mm-hmm. And he invited me to be a part of this committee that is part of the umbrella organization, the American Professional Society on the Abuse of Children. They have a Munchausen by Proxy committee. So it was really getting to know all of those amazing experts and seeing the work they're doing and really wanting to bring that into the public sphere. Right. And also just like seeing some of these other cases, like the Hope Ibarra case that we talk about,
yes,
in depth in the podcast, that like these cases are so fascinating.
It is fascinating. Can you tell us a little bit about that case?
About Hope, yeah. So she was a mother of three. She, had a very convincing 8-year-long battle with brain cancer that turned out to be a hoax. And when that hoax was uncovered, it also came out that her daughter's illnesses were also fake. And so that became, then she became the subject of a criminal investigation. She ended up spending 10 years in prison for her crimes. And so in the podcast, we interview, her ex-husband, her father, two of her siblings. They are, the most incredible people. It was so wonderful of them to share their stories with us. And we actually interview Hope herself. That's sort of
really,
that's kind of the journey of the podcast. Is we go on a lot of other kind of rabbit trails, but the journey is sort of me trying to get a hold of Hope.
That had to be healing for you, having kind of experienced your own sister having this issue.
Yeah, and I mean, I want to be really clear to say that my sister has never been charged with a crime. And several years ago in the second investigation, a family court judge dismissed the state's petition for dependency. So that is the outcome of that. So I want to be really clear about that. But yeah, I mean, it certainly is, those events have hung very heavy over me, especially since becoming a mom myself. I have a 4-year-old and a 4-month-old. And so, yeah, I mean, it was really fascinating to talk to Hope, and it really, I'm really excited for people to hear that episode in particular. I think it's really the best one of the season, and really my whole aim with this podcast was to take, most people have never heard of, a lot of people have never heard of Munchausen by proxy. If they have, it's really this sort of passing familiarity from either the Gypsy Rose Blanchard case, which is kind of the most famous case of our era, or these shows like The Act or Sharp Objects. And so they have a really sort of like very sort of blunt understanding of what it is. And I really wanted to bring sort of depth and humanity to the issue.
I was going to say, it seems to me, like you mentioned with your sister, there's varying degrees. So how common is this?
Well, it's hard to say how common it is because there has not been a lot of research into it. It's very hard. I know this from working with all these professionals on the committee. It's very hard to get research funded on this topic. But the thing that we came away with, which is sort of like the top line of actually our episode that's coming out on Thursday, is that this is way more common than most people believe. When it is talked about, it's usually mentioned as a very rare disorder or a very rare crime. And in fact, most of the experts I talk to, actually all of the experts I talk to, believe that it is way more common than most people think, and that it's probably about as prevalent as any other form of child abuse.
What did you learn from Hope? When it comes to how Munchausen by proxy should be handled, should it be looked as a mental illness? Is it a crime? I mean, what are the driving factors for these folks?
Yeah, I think in my view, there's space to look at it as both things, because really it is. And part of the problem actually comes down to the terminology. We use the term Munchausen by proxy in the podcast because that's the one that most people are familiar with, and we didn't want to get too bogged down in terminology. But the term Munchausen by proxy is used interchangeably to cover two things. One is the act of medical child abuse, and then which we sort of talked about, and then the other one is the underlying disorder, like the DSM definition of factitious disorder imposed on another, which is the sort of what's going on with the person and the sort of why of it, that they get an intrinsic reward, emotional reward from that attention. So it really can be looked at, my Detective Mike Weber, who we talked to a lot on the podcast, who is the person who brought hope to justice and has worked on many other cases. He always makes the comparison that it's really the same thing as child sex abuse and pedophilic disorder. There is an underlying disorder, but we have to prioritize the safety of children, and it should be looked at as a crime that is prosecuted. And when you're looking at a crime, you're looking at evidence, right? Not sort of not diagnosing someone with something. So I think people talk about it too often as something that people are sort of diagnosed with or not.
Right.
But no one is ever diagnosed with it in absence of being held accountable for the crime.
Okay, that is
it's
important.
not something that someone would be like, I mean, and I wish it was. I wish we could get to the place where someone could say, hey, I'm having these troubling thoughts and I need to get some help. But that is not currently how it functions.
We're not there yet.
No one would get treatment unless they were probably court ordered.
How do we then, since as Detective Weber pointed out, this is something we need to protect the children from, how do we do that? How do we keep an eye out for situations like this? I
mean, I think that awareness is a huge first step. Just understanding, what I have understood after looking at now many of these cases and really reading through, a ton of material on this, is that there is a very strong pattern. You go into one of these cases and you read one and you think, that's the craziest story I've ever heard. And then you read the rest of them and you think, oh my God, they all look so similar. So there's a very distinct pattern. So I think in particular for anybody who works with children and who makes decisions about children, so, certainly anybody who is a medical professional and a pediatric medical professional, anybody who is, works with the family courts, if you're a guardian ad litem, if you are a family court judge, if you are, if you're a police officer, like understanding what this pattern of abuse looks like is so crucial. But also for people that are working with kids, teachers, there's a lot of cases I've read about where the teachers were the people who raised the red flag because they spend so much time with the kids. But also the rest of us, just anybody who's around children.
Well, and I was going to thank you for doing that hard work for us, putting it in a place where we can learn more. What is the name again of the podcast and where do we find it?
Yeah, so the name of the podcast is Nobody Should Believe Me. It is available wherever you find on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to podcasts. So, most of us have that little podcatcher on our phone. So wherever you go for podcasts, that's where you go. The first 2 episodes are out now, and we have a new episode coming every Thursday. And so the new one comes in 2 days.
Awesome. It's called a podcatcher.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much. Great seeing you again. Congratulations on the baby.
Thank you so much, Anna.
I'm so excited.